Tombstones are already pretty scary to begin with, but these ones take that to another level. Let's take a second and think of the worst ways to die. Just a little thought experiment. Drowning, that would suck for sure. Apparently that is one of the worst pains you'll ever feel. Being burned alive, that would be really freaking bad. Nothing seems to hurt more than a bad burn. I think, getting eaten alive, like that, just full on getting mauled by something, that would suck. I can't imagine that would feel very good. But what you probably didn't think of there is getting squished. And to specifically qualify that, getting squished slowly. The reason that didn't come to mind is because no one really thinks about that as a way to go, but now that we are thinking about it, I think that ranks pretty high on my list of horrible ways to die. Getting squished slowly is exactly what happened to a poor man in the Salem witch trials. Ranker says 19 people were executed during the Salem witch trials in early 1691, most of whom were hanged. Giles Corey, however, received a different sentence. During his trial, his torturers tried to make him admit to practicing black magic and being devoted to the devil. They did this by piling rocks on his chest one by one while demanding he confess. All his neighbors watched as he was crushed in a pit, only willing to say, "More weight," rather than confess to something that he had not done. These proved to be his final words before he was pressed to death and was buried in an unmarked grave. Imagine just walking out your door one day, minding your own business, then getting taken away by the authorities, accused of something that you probably have absolutely no knowledge of, and then found guilty of that said thing. Then, as your punishment for that crime that you didn't do, you get taken to the public square and all of your neighbors and friends come out to watch as you get rocks slowly piled onto your body, eventually resulting in all of your bones to break and your internal organs to burst. Yeah. This really sucked for my dude Giles. The Salem witch trials, in my opinion, are one of the most messed up times in history. Like, that entire scenario is just one freaking mess, people losing their minds over something that they don't understand. And poor Giles got crushed for it, and now we can all remember on his tombstone. Number 4 on this list is specimens. Whenever I hear the word specimen, I get a pretty distinct image of science and laboratories, test subjects. I think of movie scenes where there are vials of weird substances and really smart people doing some really questionable forward-thinking stuff. What I really don't want to be thinking about though is dead bodies. That's pretty much what we have here though. Creepy says, Ohio Asylum is known for its creepy and thrilling gravestones. However, 2 of those gravestones are amongst the most horrific ones. These tombstones read the word specimens only, with no other details like date or name. What freaks people out is the imagination of what the word specimens could possibly be referring to. What are these specimens of? Many theories have been made. Specimens of body parts of the deceased or bodies of on whom the untested medications were tested. We always knew that the old asylums were bad news, but this is taking it to another level. Like old asylums back in the day would run some very questionable experiments against people's wills and do things that they never should have done. This was also absolutely ridiculous because the whole point of these places should have been to help people who are dealing with mental issues. Even after all of this though, I never would have thought that it would have gotten to this. To be sent to this place and then later, after having had multiple experiments done on you that your body probably didn't respond well to then be reduced to a small box buried outside that reads specimens on it. To not even have a name anymore, but just to be considered a failed science experiment. This is some super sick and twisted stuff right here, guys, and it's part of the reason why asylums were feared for so long. Number 3 on this list is the baby monster. This one is not only scary, but it's also really sad. If a gravestone has the word monster on it to describe what is underneath said gravestone, then one gets a pretty scary and creepy image. This is not the full truth though when it comes to what happened with this gravestone. Creepy says this tombstone was inscribed in a time when the word monster was often used to describe a person with serious deformities in any form. Considering that, and also the short span of time for which the baby lived, it can be theorized that the baby was severely deformed and could not live for very long. The death of said individual is not certain, and it's intriguing to know that no real name was given to this baby. When this child would have been buried, you have to imagine that it would have been in an era where whatever deformities it did have wouldn't have been understood. People may have suspected the devil or some demonic presence to have caused what happened here. The sad truth is that this was a kid just like anyone else who just kinda got a little bit unlucky at birth. Back in this day, that sort of unluckiness though wouldn't have been accepted or tolerated. So in this case, we're just left with a really creepy gravestone that should make us all very thankful that we were born in this era and not back then when this sort of stuff would happen. Number 2 on this list is the Unforgiving Society. This next one should make you very happy that you live in the time period that you do now, but also make you think a lot about some of the recent political shifts going on in the United States. Creepy says, this tombstone is of a girl who died a sad death. She passed away in very unfortunate circumstances. She was impregnated before marriage, after which she struggled to get an abortion for her parents' honor. When making her tombstone, the creators could not help but feel guilt for her story. The words on the tombstone describe how unfair and unforgiving the cruel society had been to her. Now the tombstone actually reads, Kate McCormick, seduced and pregnant by her father's friend. Unwed, she died from abortion, her only choice. Abandoned in life and death by family, with but a single rose from her mother. Buried only through the kindness of unknown benefactors. Died February 1875, age 21. Victim of an unforgiving society, have mercy on us. Now the first thing that I thought of when I read this was the laws that are being stripped right now in the United States. This is a very polarizing issue where strong opinions are had on all sides, but this tombstone, in my opinion, is a clear example of what can happen when that right is stripped away from women. Kate didn't deserve the fate that she got, and maybe the scariest part about all of this is that this storyline, the one that we saw right here, I mean, a similar one could still happen today. And finally, number 1 on this list is Mary C. Donlenchi. Mary C. really wasn't too fond of the people who put her where she is now. In fact, she hated them so much that she put a curse on them, one that might still be running rampant throughout their bloodlines to this day. Her tombstone read, "May eternal damnation be upon those in Wailing Part who, without knowing me, have maliciously vilified me. May the curse of God be upon them and theirs." Now, the crazy part about all this though is that apparently her neighbors and the people that she's cursing, they didn't do anything wrong to her. Creepy says, as shown by the words on the tombstone, Mary C. felt nothing but anger towards her neighbors. The delusions she had of her neighbors conspiring against her are depicted on this tombstone. She left all of her possessions to the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals after her death in 1985. The neighbors reported how the deceased used to constantly indulge in petty fights and negative behaviors. So apparently this curse was just her being super petty. Imagine you only have a few more words on planet Earth, and instead of like telling your family you love them and stuff, you decide to curse your neighbors who literally did nothing wrong to you. This curse hasn't been super effective though, which is a good thing. Apparently some of the members of the cursed family have noticed something every now and again, but nothing too major that should make anybody freak out. Still though, really hoping that I don't become my neighbor's punching bag and get cursed from beyond the grave for literally nothing.
Number 5, Union Graveyard. This specific cemetery is located near Stepney Road in Easton, Connecticut, and dates back to the 1700s. According to ghost hunters, it is one of the most haunted cemeteries in the entire United States. The most popular ghostie is the elusive White Lady, popularized partially thanks to Ed Warren having an obsession with her and possibly catching footage of her. Some believe she is Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, and Harriet herself passing soon after. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son, and still wanders their final resting place searching him out. Others believe she is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who killed her husband, and later herself, and is doomed to wander the graveyard. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, so my kinda gal. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over. Others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. In 1993, local firefighter Glenn Powell received a call about a transformer explosion and drove to the scene of the incident with a police officer and observed a female driver following closely behind him on the road. He remembers the night sky had turned pink, and the explosion emitted large amounts of electricity that made the hair on his arms stand up at quite the distance. Glenn was driving along the road beside the cemetery when the officer seated next to him yelled, "Watch out!" In the middle of the road was a woman with long brown flowing hair and wearing a white Victorian nightgown. Glenn described seeing a surprised look on her face before slamming on the brake, but was unable to avoid hitting her, describing it like hitting a brick wall, with the back of his truck flying into the air and the policeman next to him being launched into the dashboard. The driver behind him jumped out of the car and helped the two men search the area of the crash to check on the woman, but she was gone. Glenn is quoted as saying there was no sign of bodily fluids, there was no clothing, there was nobody, there was nothing. Now, Lorraine Warren used to often take walks through the cemetery, saying that it was one of the most haunted places around. Ed caught the white lady on camera on September 1st of 1990 at 2:40 a.m., which was his 7th night in a row of filming at the cemetery. Determined to have proof, and described dark figures surrounding her, shapes that he thought were wood ghosts that seemed to jump on her while they all argued. Now, the Warrens have also referenced a red eyes ghost, so a pair of red eyes which they claimed can be seen in the forest behind the cemetery, not to be confused with bike reflectors that locals have placed within the grounds to scare teens. The famous duo claimed the eyes belonged to Earl Kellogg, a man who was set on fire across the street in 1935. Number 4. Highgate Cemetery. Highgate Cemetery is located in North London, England, and was assigned by architect Stephen Geary. There are approximately 170,000 people buried in around 53,000 graves across the West and East cemeteries for context, and today's tale has to do with vampires. In 1967, two teenage girls were walking home along the nearby Swains Lane and claimed to have witnessed the dead rising from their graves by the cemetery's north gate. Another teenager had been awoken one night with something cold and clinging on her hand, which left prominent marks the next morning, while reports circulated of a tall man in a hat walking in the area before melting through the cemetery's walls. On Halloween night of 1968, a group of teenagers interested in the occult visited Tottenham Park Cemetery at a time when it was being regularly vandalized by intruders. According to a report in the London Evening News on November 2nd, the teens arranged flowers taken from graves in circular patterns with arrows of blooms pointing to a new grave, which was uncovered. And by that I mean a coffin was opened and the body inside was disturbed. But their most macabre act was driving an iron stake in the form of a cross through the lid and into the chest of the corpse. In a letter to the Hampstead and Highgate Express on February 6 of 1970, David Farrant wrote that when passing Highgate Cemetery on Christmas Eve of 1969, he had glimpsed a gray figure, which he considered to be supernatural, and asked if others had seen anything similar. Sean Manchester claimed David's gray figure was a vampire, and the media quickly latched on, embellishing the tale with stories of the vampire being a king of the vampires or practicing black magic. See, king of the vampires? That's my kind of guy. A rivalry grew between David and Sean, with each claiming that he could and would expel or destroy the specter. Sean declared that he would hold an exorcism on Friday the 13th of March, which, you know, it's a good spooky date for that sort of thing. ITV conducted interviews with both men, and others who claimed to have seen supernatural figures in the cemetery, which were transmitted early on the evening of the 13th, and within 2 hours, a mob of hunters from all over London and beyond had swarmed over the gates and walls into the locked cemetery, despite police efforts to get them the heck out of there. Some months later, on August 1st of 1970, the charred and headless remains of a woman's body were found not far from the catacomb, believed to have been used in a black magic ritual. David was found by police in the churchyard beside the cemetery one night in August, carrying a crucifix and a wooden stake. He was arrested, but when the case came to court, it was dismissed. There was more publicity about David and Sean when rumors spread that they would meet in a magician's duel on Parliament Hill on Friday the 13th of April in 1973, which never occurred. The vampire is said to lurk until this day, so maybe I'll have to make a trip eventually to pay my respects, if you get what I mean. Number 3. Hollywood Forever. The Hollywood Forever Cemetery is one of the oldest in the state of California and is located on Santa Monica Boulevard. Many famous individuals are buried in the cemetery, such as Rudolph Valentino, Mickey Rooney, Anton Yelchin, and Judy Garland. First used in 1899, it features well over 50 acres of land for families and visitors. There are still thousands of spaces available and new mausoleums being completed, but it's time to talk about the ghosties. It should also be noted that Paramount Studios is located near the cemetery, and it is said to be one of the most haunted movie studios of all time. So let me know if y'all want me to ever elaborate on that. I'll start with the obvious, and I think the most dedicated fan ever, the Woman in Black. Also, yes, my bias for unknown ghostly ladies, known only by their outfits, is coming into play. This is why I choose to always dress up, because I'd personally hate for my last outfit to be my raggedy PJs. What do you think? Would this be a good final resting outfit? If not, I'm open to suggestions. Rudolph had passed away at the age of 31 in 1926 after surgery from an ulcer, and over 100,000 people gathered outside the funeral home. Fun fact, there were rumors that a wax replica was used to protect the body at the service. He was quite the popular heartthrob at the time. Heck, I'm racking my brain for like a modern day equivalent, and I'm failing. Just imagine your celebrity crush, but everyone also liked that same crush to a crazy level. It wasn't until after he had been laid to rest that the woman in black began to appear, and mainly she likes to come out on the anniversary of his death, dressed from head to toe in black, including a veil. She would leave roses on the grave and was originally thought to be Pola Negri, the woman he was engaged to during the time of his death, but nope. Many women have come forward claiming they are the woman in black. However, none of these claims have turned out to be true. Alrighty, ghostie number 2, Miss Virginia Rappy. On Labor Day in 1921, Virginia had attended a party for Mr. Roscoe Arbuckle at the St. Francis Hotel, which was held to celebrate acquiring a very large contract. Sadly, at that very party, Virginia had become sick and mysteriously passed a few days later at only 26 years old. Now, many claims were made surrounding her death, including the possibility of Arbuckle taking sexual advantage of her, a claim that was later proven false but sadly had negatively affected his career. No one knows exactly what happened to her on that fateful Labor Day. Around the site of Virginia's grave, folks have reported the temperature dropping to an icy cold climate, and have also heard what appears to be sobbing. Many believe that she is still dealing with this traumatic event, with many visitors clearly seeing her weeping on the edge of water that is located on the grounds. I'm sure there are plenty of other ghosties, so let me know if anyone knows of any that I might have forgotten. Number 2, Resurrection Cemetery. Located in Chicago, this cemetery is the home of a very well-known ghostie, Resurrection Mary, who is also commonly referred to as B-L-O-O-D-Y Mary. Blame the interwebs for the spelling out. Has different origins, depending on who's telling the story, but the most shared narratives put her untimely death sometime in the late 1920s to early 1930s, when she was either a victim of a fatal car crash on the way to a night of dancing, or the unfortunate victim of a hit-and-run accident while she was walking home in the rain. Most documented reports of Mary describe her as a young, fashionable blonde woman, no older than mid-20s, wearing a white ball gown, accessories, and a hairstyle to match. The first person who claimed to encounter Resurrection Mary was a man named Jerry Pallas. In 1939, Jerry was at a popular dance hall when he was love-struck by a young blonde woman. He approached her, and the two hit it off and spent the night dancing away, even sharing a scandalous kiss. According to Jerry, her hands were as cold as ice, but he had a warm heart that made up for it. So, eventually, closing time came around and Jerry offered the woman a ride home, and she asked to be taken down Archer Avenue. She motioned for Jerry to stop in front of the Resurrection Cemetery, and when he did, she got out and vanished before his eyes. Jerry was shaken with disbelief, but not too frightened to seek out answers. The next morning, he made his way to the address where Mary said she lived, over in Southside. He knocked on the door and encountered her mother. Now, when Jerry asked about the woman he had met the previous night, she informed him that she'd been dead for nearly 3 years. It turned out that, yep, Jerry had encountered Resurrection Mary, and over the next few decades, several other men would have similar experiences. But that was the one that began the legend. One cab driver in the 1970s claimed to see a young woman standing in front of the Resurrection Cemetery one night, and he pulled over to check to see if she needed a ride, and as the woman approached the vehicle, yep, she disappeared. Another encounter with Mary occurred in 1979 when a separate cab driver named Ralph claimed to pick up a young female hitchhiker he believed to be no older than 21. As the two drove up Archer Avenue, she suddenly jumped up and said, "Here, here." The car came to a sudden stop and the woman pointed to a small abandoned shack off of the left side of the road. Now, Ralph questioned whether this was actually where she wanted to go, but before he got an answer, she disappeared without ever opening the door of his cab. His encounter was detailed in a 1979 issue of Suburban Trip magazine, and in 1980, Claire Rudnicki and her husband Mark were driving down Archer Avenue towards the cemetery when they spotted a young woman in a white gown slowly walking down the side of the road. Now, it was immediately obvious that she wasn't an ordinary person, as she was partially transparent with a white aura around her, almost as if she was glowing. Shocked, the couple wondered if they had just seen a ghost, and when they once again reached the spot where Mary was walking, you guessed it, she was gone. Mary is supposedly buried at this cemetery in Justice, Illinois, about a 30-minute drive southwest of Chicago, and it gives her her stomping grounds as well as her iconic name. She likes to stick to that particular stretch of road on Archer Avenue, between the cemetery and what was once the O. Henry Ballroom in Willow Springs. Over the years, several researchers have tried to determine the exact identity of Mary, but no one knows. Due to the number of sightings and the credibility of those who claim to see her, Resurrection Mary is said to be one of Chicago's most famous ghosts. Number 1, Stull Cemetery. Stull Cemetery and the abandoned church that rests next to it is located in the tiny, nearly forgotten Kansas town of Stull. Oh, and it's believed to be one of the 7 portals to hell. So counted among the most haunted cemeteries in the world, Stull Cemetery has gained a haunted reputation due to a legend that involves Satan. The legends say that these stories have been linked to Stull for more than 100 years, but none of them made it into print until the 1970s. Specifically, in November of 1974, an article appeared in the University of Kansas student newspaper that spoke of a number of strange occurrences in the Stull churchyard. According to the article, Stull was haunted by legends of diabolical, supernatural happenings, and the legends claimed that the cemetery was one of the 2 places on Earth where the devil appears in person 2 times each year. Apparently, most students learned of Stull's diabolical reputation from their grandparents, or, other older individuals, but that many of them claimed first-hand encounters with things that could not be explained. One student claimed to have been grabbed by the arm by something unseen, while others spoke of unexplained memory loss when visiting the place. The legends also say that the devil has been appearing here since the 1850s, and insists that the original name of the town was Skull, and that the later corruption into that of Stull was simply to cover the fact that the area was steeped in black magic. Number 5, pressed to death. Okay, on their own, the words may not completely strike fear, but bear with me a moment here while I explain before you click off. I find historical context tends to help quite a bit, especially since those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. So the Salem witch trials in the early 1690s were responsible for the deaths of around 20 folks, mostly by the way of the rope necklace or drowning, but this is a unique situation. Giles Corey received a more painful death by pressing on the weights of stones, and his last words were, "More weight." Look, I love a spiteful last couple of words against ignorant folks, so I'm already Team Giles in this story. I'm gonna have to mentally remind myself though that I'm not talking about Buffy before I get confused. Trust me, it happens easily. So before Giles was accused of witchcraft, his wife Martha Corey was also accused, which is pretty par for the course at the time. She was a woman dedicated to the church and not aware of the level of paranoia, and denied calmly in such a way that the judges misunderstood her gesture for that of someone who has an evil plan that is successful so far. If anyone is unaware, back in the days of the trials, you could be accused of being a witch for simply looking at someone the wrong way. And the trials and torment were designed in a way that even if you were, innocent, you were doomed. Trust me, but if you don't, I'd recommend going back and watching some of the videos I've done on witch trials that get pretty in-depth to the actual trials and punishments. So Giles' execution was witnessed by all his neighbors as he was crushed with stones while they were trying to convince him to admit to practicing black magic and being devoted to the devil. And rather than confessing to something he had not done, Giles simply said, "More weight," to try and quicken his death. "More weight" is also one of his more famous quotes, and it showed his willing sacrifice, which demonstrated that Corey was, in fact, not likely to be guilty of witchcraft. Imagine if we labeled all tombstones with what, that person had passed away of. I'm aware that a good chunk of the stones out there practice this, but I think it would be really neat to see some weirder stones out there. Knowing me, I'm eventually gonna pass with something goofy. Either my ankles are gonna give out at a bad time, or my long-lasting rib dislocation is gonna do me in. What do you want on your tombstone though? Let me know in the comments. Number 4, Ouija tombstone. If I haven't been clear enough about not using Ouija boards, it is the biggest no situation I can think of. Personally, this might be the most terrifying tombstone on today's list, in my opinion, but I'm aware that not everyone shares my opinion on the awful board, ergo why I didn't kick off today with this stone, even though I was super tempted to do so. So, who could this crazy tombstone belong to? A Mr. Elijah Jefferson Bond, who was an American lawyer and inventor, and he's best known for inventing the Ouija board. He was born on January 23rd of 1847 in Bel Air, Maryland, to Charlotte Howard and William B. Bond. In terms of education, he graduated from the University of Maryland School of Law and served in the Confederate States Army during the American Civil War, before working as a lawyer in Baltimore until around 1918. Although he invented and patented many items, including a steam boiler, he is best remembered for patenting what became known as the Ouija board. He filed for a United States patent on May 28th of 1890, and Charles W. Kennard and William H. A. Maupin were listed as assignees. The patent was granted on February 3rd of 1891, and Bond eventually sold the U.S. distribution rights for the board to the Kennard Novelty Company, who went on to print the board until Parker Brothers took over that company in 1996. Nowadays, Hasbro is responsible for still manufacturing. Wow, that's not how I say that. Nowadays, Hasbro is responsible for still manufacturing and distributing the board to the public. I have many bones to pick with Hasbro, but that would probably be the main one. I'll also never forgive them for what they did with the Disney Princess doll line while they briefly held the licensing. It was just a sad time in doll collector history. Pardon me, I got a little sidetracked there. Elijah Bond's tombstone is cryptic in the sense that it can theoretically relay different messages to different people, or contact demons and cause havoc. Also, the Ouija board wasn't there from the get-go. Elijah was actually originally buried in an unmarked grave. He passed away in 1921, but it wasn't until 2007 that a man named Robert Murch discovered discovered the exact location of his grave. After that, funds were raised to erect a tombstone that memorialized his achievement. While it's a fitting tribute and all, I feel like a large planchette situation might have been less dangerous. Over the years, many small planchettes have been found near the stone, and that's just a little too tempting fate for my liking. Sure, I might have a habit of enjoying, Ouija imagery myself, but you'll never catch me wearing my board-inspired shirt or sweatpants with my planchette necklaces. Ditto for holding my planchette pillow while wearing the same board sweatpants. It's just a little darker than I like my dark arts. If you got that reference, enjoy a virtual cookie. Number 3, Fernand Arbelot. Okay, technically I'm cheating myself a little this time, since this is more of a case of terrifying imagery instead of a written horror. But a picture is worth 1,000 words or something along those lines, so I'm counting the scary visual. In life, he was allegedly an architect, musician, actor, and apparently a man of mystery, since very little is known about him. So Arbelot was born in 1880, and a Parisian newspaper ran an obituary for him on November 19th of 1942. Again, very little information was given, other than he was serving as a director in the Westminster Bank. He is remembered for his one desire in death, which was to forever gaze on the face of his wife. Legend states that his wish behind the tomb design was to gaze upon the beautiful face for all eternity. I guess that's a form of true love? Granted, I'm the wrong gal to ask about what a healthy relationship looks like, since I grew up with a raging narcissist for a mom, and currently, I'm a single Pringle with a scattered dating history. There are a few healthy relationships in my friend group that give me hope for my own future, but I'm still very much a cynic when it comes to observing relationships. So the tomb in question depicts a man lying on his back, holding up a disembodied head, and gazing into its cold stone eyes. The grave monument was designed by Belgian sculptor Adolphe Wansart and constructed in 1946, which was 4 years after the original passing. The epitaph on the grave reads, "Il fera à merveille de beaux voyages qu'il aimait jusqu'au bout de la vie." Or, in English, they marveled at the beauty of the journey that brought them to the end of life. With Canadian French being my second language, I often forget that I should say French quotes in English as well, for clarification's sake, or in case I mess up Parisian French. So Arbelot died in Paris, France during the German Nazi occupation. Sadly, the interwebs don't like when I say the real word, so bear with my thesaurus on that one. One story is that he actually killed his wife and then took his own life, but it's not confirmed. Once again, there are very few records currently available to indicate what he achieved in life, including the name of his wife or her place of burial. If you want to visit this work of art yourself, it can be found while wandering the grounds of Père Lachaise in Paris. It is, after all, one of the most famous cemeteries in the entire world, and it's strongly linked to death. Père Lachaise is known for its great beauty and the incredible demand for its few burial spaces. It's also the largest cemetery in Paris, at 44 hectares or 110 acres. With more than 3.5 million visitors annually, it is the most visited necropolis in the world. It is located in the 20th arrondissement and was the first garden cemetery, as well as the first municipal cemetery in Paris. It is also the site of 3 World War I memorials. The cemetery is, by the way, located on the Boulevard de Ménilmontant. Number 2, Mona Harold Vanni. Parents. For most folks, they're people you can rely on, and honestly, I love that for you. But for folks like myself, who might have grown up with a narcissist or worse, my heart goes out to you, and this stone might give you some inspiration. So while mothers are supposed to leave a good memory of their unconditional love for their offspring, Mona left a memory so horrific that none of her 3 descendants attended the funeral and mutually agreed to create this scathing tombstone for their little loved parent. The inscription reads, "To our mother, Mona Harold Vanni, listing her date of birth as October 14th, 1912, and her passing as April 11th of 1996. You spent your life expressing animosity for nearly every person you encountered, including your children. Within hours of his death, you even managed to declare your husband of 57 years unsuited to being either a spouse or a father. Hopefully, you are now insulated from all the dissatisfaction you found in human relationships. Buddy, Jackie, and Mike." We do have a direct quote from Jackie, saying that the sentiments on her grave barely covers the brutal treatment the family members received. He got the worst as he looked and acted like his father, who he never saw when he was young, since the dad passed away in the Second World War. In comparison, the grave of their father, and Mona's second husband, reads, "To my father, Guido William Vanni, born on July 7th, 1912, and passing April 26, 1994. During your last few months, I wanted to sit with you and thank you for all you had done for me, apologize for the times I might have disappointed you, tell you I loved you, and say goodbye. I never found the courage to start that conversation. On the chance you can still hear me, thank you, I'm sorry, I love you, goodbye. Mike." Honestly, this is giving me ideas for when my parents eventually leave this mortal world. To my mom, I hope you find life without making yourself and everyone around you miserable, since that's the main reason I cut you out of my life. Dear Dad, I love you and I truly hope you find the love you deserve that isn't with her. Okay, moving on before I tear up. Number 1, Lily Gray. In a quiet, unremarkable area in a Salt Lake City cemetery sits a gravestone bearing an epitaph so bizarre that for many years it has inspired rumors, speculation, curiosity, and fear in everyone who comes across its eerie message. Unlike other graves surrounding it, with common inscriptions such as, rest in peace, in loving memory, or whatever other generic wording. This particular tombstone reads, Victim of the Beast 666. While her tribute says she died of natural causes, her tombstone denotes her as a victim of the beast. So this may allude to the fact that her husband, who this lovely lady married at the age of 72, was detained in the past for criminal activities. The nearby area also saw many of Aleister Crowley's adherents, so maybe he and his minions played into Grey's demise? Oh, for reference, Aleister Crowley was an English occultist, philosopher, ceremonial magician, poet, painter, novelist, and mountaineer who founded the religion of Thelema, identifying himself as the prophet who could save everyone.